Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mortal Kombat video. Today, with us hotly anticipating the next big release for Mortal Kombat. Whether lost in the ether that might be, please feed your children, Ed Boon.
It's coming, okay? Hey!
Yeah, I know, but like a specific date would be nice.
Today, with us having touched so much on this new upcoming timeline, as well as the possible established new order, I figured it would be both fun and nostalgic on what characters from the 3D era of games could actually be active and present in this new era. I will be breaking down the characters that get in, what ones should be repackaged and redesigned, because there's actually a lot of them, and of course, what ones do we cast into the abyss that will hopefully never return. With that said, this should be a pretty fun video, because if you don't know, I'm a pretty big hater of the 3D era. Not so much the games themselves, but the characters that come from that time are interesting. I think the right word's interesting. So you can let me know how wrong my opinions are down in the comments below. But on a less humorous note, I did largely try to remain as unbiased as possible when it comes to actually making this video. I wanted to talk about what they brought to the table, and if they fit into this time period, which does mean yes, I will be strictly focusing on the Great Kung Lao era ending, as I largely do think it's the best option that presents the most potential in terms of storytelling, as it does align with the series' core themes, as well as its legacy. But, as always, before we do begin, please don't forget to subscribe, as well as tick that bell, as it will keep you in the loop of all things Mortal Kombat related here, as we slowly start creeping in to the next big NetherRealm release. And if you just so happen to like this video, and wish to maybe see me explore the Shang Tsung side, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It honestly does go a long way here. But without any further ado, let's get right into things. So for me to really rank them in a visual manner, I did create a little tier list here that will allow me to differentiate the different characters from each other, while still keeping a visual aid of what I think works and what I think does not work. This won't all be in order, but I only have 3 columns here. Green means perfect, yellow means redesign, rebuild, and red, well, red just means get f***ed. So with the rules now set, let's start with our first character here, and that is actually gonna be Boraicho, and this man is gonna go into perfect. Now, I know Boraicho isn't exactly a very popular character. If anything, he's unbelievably putrid. But what's interesting about Boraicho is that he's an Outworlder who trains Earthrealmers, which is something that's kind of unheard of when we take into account the series' history of Outworld and Earthrealm turmoil. Along with this, with the games being set in an earlier timeline, Boraicho could very well be alive. If you want to really kind of make things interesting, you could have Boraicho teach the Great Kung Lao, or maybe even put a fun twist on this idea that we meet an extremely young version of Boraicho. Maybe one that idolizes the Great Kung Lao and is compelled and inspired by his legend to teach the next generation. There are some pretty damn cool ideas to play around with here. Of course, this is all under the assumption that he won't be appointed as a god, which has kind of been teased at. Now next we have Li Mei, and I'm actually gonna put her right beneath Boraicho, the first character in the rebuilt redesigned section. Now when I look at Li Mei, all I see is a boring concept on a largely bland design, as Li Mei at her very core was built to be the Liu Kang of the 3D era, and then they didn't follow through with that. Li Mei is sadly largely forgettable, despite her pretty damn cool redesign for Deception. But unfortunately, that is actually something that has historically plagued the 3D era of games. Great designs and ideas that are executed in a very flat manner. So if we're dialing everything back, and we are set in a timeline where it's now Onaga that leads Outworld, you could always tie in the idea that maybe she's battling Earthrealmers to earn his love and favor. Something that does loosely tie into her Deception ending. Yes, it does stray quite a far way from the original concept of that ending, but honestly, that's what I think she kind of needs in order to be her own character. Also, if we're kind of redesigning this character from a visual standpoint, let's go with her Battle of the Realms outfit. That outfit looks fantastic, and is also quite traditional in terms of what you expect from Outworlders to wear. Like, look at Shao Kahn and then look at Reiko, right? So yes, if we do get to Li Mei, let's tinker around with what she was. Now moving on, we now have Kenshi, a fan favorite, and I'm gonna hate this. I'm gonna have to put this man in the yellow section. Now, before you kill me, let me just say, great design, great idea, great concept, but due to the time period this does take place in, it actually makes much more sense for one of Kenshi's ancestors to kind of take over his role. And from a storytelling standpoint, that's actually super interesting, as we can learn about the legacy of Sento, an ancient blade that comes from a long warrior line of kings. It's an idea and concept that's been around since Deadly Alliance and has never been fully explored. We can actually learn more about the spirits that lie within the blade. We can also maybe tinker around and play with the idea of how the royal Takahashi bloodline fell, and maybe the curse that does plague this family, as all of them seem to be fated to go blind and then wield Sento. We saw this at an ancestral mural, Kenshi himself, and Takeda nearly going blind during the events of Mortal Kombat X. Maybe I'm being superstitious, but there's clearly something not quite right when it comes to this bloodline. Now, this idea just came to my mind right now and isn't actually part of the script I wrote out for this, but I just realized and kind of semi-forgot that I think Elder God or God Kenshi was kind of a thing. And I mean, hey, if Boraicho can possibly become a god, why not Kenshi? I'll let you decide down in the comments below. Now, our next character is Mavado, and we're gonna throw him right into the red. To me, Mavado has always had an incredibly flat design. He's never really added anything to the Mortal Kombat universe, outside of being a red dragon goon. And of course, the only big feat of strength he did have was taking Cabal's blades. So that's kind of the only real thing going for him here. And Cabal from MK3 onwards is never quite held at the same esteem he was back during the events of Mortal Kombat 3. Fundamentally, there is just not that much going on with his design as well as his gameplay here. Now, yes, we could do a full-on redesign of the character, something that does make him interesting. But if that so was the case, then why not just make a new character entirely at that point? A guy with bungee cords and hook blades, just not unique or appealing to me for what I'm looking for in the Mortal Kombat universe. So Mavado's gonna stay in the red for now. But that said, we're now gonna go back in the green, and we're actually going to take Nitara with us. Now, despite my own feelings on the character, I do think Nitara does deserve some recognition, especially after she was split in half like a baguette during that Mortal Kombat movie. I genuinely actually feel sorry for Nitara fans. I really do feel like the time period this takes place in actually does favor her inclusion here. And in terms of people who have utilized blood magic prior to Scarlet, Nitara is the natural go-to pick here. An interesting layer that can be added to Nitara's character is her relationship with Vaeternus. What's Vaeternus? Well, I can't be surprised you're asking that, because it's the home realm of the vampire that has never been explored or even been referenced to that much in the Mortal Kombat universe. It's largely unexplored, so I think this is a good opportunity to kind of explore the different realms outside of the core ones we've come to know for a long time. So yes, I think Nitara is up here for good reason. Next we have Drahmin and Moloch. Yes, I'm gonna bundle them together, and I'm just gonna slip them both into the red zone here. Now, they are both in the red area because they're kind of a package deal. I'm actually largely indifferent to either of these characters, and I also think that's kind of the reason why they're in the red area. They just don't really scream to me outside of their designs. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm actually quite a fan of Drahmin's own origin, how he was like a fallen king. But Moloch is just a giant Oni with a club hand. To me, it goes back to what I said about Mavado. With the grand calculus of the Mortal Kombat universe, there needs to be a form of uniqueness amongst each combatant. And Moloch, to me, just it's kind of a miss. And the thing is, these two have largely been forgotten. And this isn't me actually criticizing them in a negative way. In terms of sub-bosses, throughout the history of Mortal Kombat, you never actually hear Drahmin or Moloch ever be referenced to. It's typically Goro, Kintaro, or Motaro that they do name drop. Plus, we got to take into account, with the game being set during the Great Kung Lao era. God, I wonder how many times I've said that this video. Whilst they most definitely can be present and alive, I feel like Goro would naturally be the main priority of this game, as he's always been painted as Kung Lao's big bad. So moving on, we now have to talk about this piece of shit, Hsu Hao, and I'm gonna put him right here. The best way to describe Hsu Hao is forgettable at best. He is a poor man's Kano, and is just the most non-character the series has ever produced. He literally plays no actual role in anything. He's the heel to a piece of bread, a grain of sweet corn in chronic diarrhea. He's actually more entertaining as a character that everyone actively shits on than actually being a character himself. And you know what? I'm okay with that. So yeah, Hsu Hao's gonna stay in the red, get f***ed. Now next, we do have Frost, and I'm actually gonna put her in the yellow section here. In terms of visual design, it's hard not to recognize just how cool the Cryomancers are. Bi-Han, fantastic. Kuai Liang, amazing. Frost, great. Not as a cyborg though. I'm just not feeling that design. But I adore the concept behind this character, as the dynamic she has with Kuai Liang is simply fantastic. It's a classic old school, wise typical grandmaster, teaches the defiant and rebellious youth. It's a tale as old as time, but if done right, it can actually be amazing. And the main problem here is, it's never been done right. Whilst I wasn't a big fan of her cyberization, it didn't really feel like it did much for her character. You didn't feel the sacrifice she made in order to have a new vision for the Lin Kuei. Thus, she didn't kind of earn our sympathy, but just so much of herself she had to sacrifice. So, with all of that history kind of in mind, I'm actually okay with Frost maybe sitting this one out. But with it being set in a different time period, it would make sense for maybe a different female Cryomancer to step into the role of Frost. Kind of like how Sub-Zero is a mantle and title. I think this is a pretty good way of doing it. Coming to the end of the Deadly Alliance roster, we now have Blaze, and this one's gonna hurt me a bit, but it is for good reason. Unfortunately, whilst Blaze is a pivotal character in the original timeline, being the determining factor of its untimely demise, Blaze is more of a pivotal character to the Pyramid of Argus than he actually is being his own character. He's kind of a walking MacGuffin here, and it only really shows in how unused he was, having made cameos all the way since Mortal Kombat 2, and only then being utilized during Deadly Alliance. Could he be repackaged? Absolutely. I do not doubt that at all. But is his inclusion necessary with what we know of Armageddon? I'd largely say no, especially with the new timeline reset. And again, possibly a new Age of Gods. I will say though, that Armageddon design is amazing. And next we have Mocap, and I don't feel like I need to say much about this one. Now moving on to Deception, we're going to start off strong here, and we're going to drop Havik in the perfect section. Obviously a big yes from me, because I'm totally not biased about this choice at all. Definitely not. Totally not like I've been advocating for this character since Mortal Kombat X. Conceptually, Havik is weird, man. And you know what? That's what I love about his character. Because everything about the Chaos Realm is so unbelievably backwards. So it's hard to not be intrigued by what both Havik and the Chaos Realm do bring to the table here. But again, being a product of the 3D era of Mortal Kombat, he was one of those many characters that did largely go underdeveloped, only really taking a moment to shine during the now retconned Mortal Kombat X comic book line. Now, does he necessarily fit into the Great Kung Lao's narrative? Not really, if I'm honest. But if we're actually looking for a reason to just kind of insert him into the story, in his arcade ladder ending, all the way back in Deception, Havik was seeking the heart of the Dragon King Onaga, because by actually eating it, he would gain the incredible ability to utilize his unparalleled necromancy. So maybe what Havik is doing could be entirely separate from the main story of Mortal Kombat 12. So yes, I think there's actually quite a few ways to spin Havik into this narrative. Plus, he's actually been in quite high demand for a while. Now, with my favourite 3D character out of the way, let's move on to the one that I dislike the most, especially if you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, and that is of course Shujinko. But to many people's surprise here, I'm actually gonna put him in the rebuilt reboot section. Again, I've made it no secret that I'm not a fan of Shujinko, but I do strongly believe that he could be repackaged and be repackaged well. Much like Li Mei in that sense, Shujinko was designed to be the next Liu Kang. And one thing we have already clearly established is that this is not a mantle that any character can live up to. If anything, it's a crutch to them. Plus, it's largely not helped, but Shujinko was a largely spineless character to Damashi, with minimal convictions that didn't set him apart from any NPC in the game. On the bright side, it did allow the exploration of the realms to flourish that much more, but it did ultimately come at the cost of his own character. Plus again, if we're playing around with the idea of Onaga being alive, then Shujinko could serve an entirely different purpose. With no Damashi granting him his ability of mimicry, it would give him a reason to develop his own fighting style, something I've largely criticized him for, as I'm simply not a fan of mimic characters. So I think by removing this issue away, Shujinko could actually flourish into his own character, one that is largely different than what was originally conceived. Now, going off the rest of my list here, if there is chaos, then there must be order. So I'm gonna take Hotaru, and I'm actually gonna slip him into the green section here. It feels only right that if we have one, we kind of do have to have the other. They are different sides of the same coin, but the interesting part about Hotaru's character is that he quite literally embodies the purest form of justice, no matter what form that might take. Historically, we do know that Hotaru has had ties to the Dragon King, as he did align himself with Onaga during the latter half of Deception. Now again, if Onaga is alive, and we do go back to having a tournament format, then I see absolutely no need to change Hotaru's character at all, as the philosophy and ideology of the character aligns with the Dragon King's own desires. So yes, I think Hotaru should make the cut here. Now moving on, we do have Ashrah here. I'm gonna have to put her at what I would say is the tail end of the rebuild reboot section. In terms of design, I think Ashrah is fantastic. And I love the idea of a demon having her own redemption story, even if that is horribly misguided. But the problem with Ashrah's character is that she's one from the Netherrealm. Thus, she isn't entirely obliged to align herself with Outworld, not that she historically has before. And two, her main rival is Nitara, a character that fundamentally is more of a side character to Mortal Kombat's story than absolutely anything else. The only way they could utilize this character would be to fully repackage her. As to how, honestly, I'm not entirely too sure. Maybe she could align herself with the Earthrealmers under her human disguise as a way to redeem herself. That's definitely one. But I'm not entirely sure, because so much of her story revolves around her corrupted blade, and if you take that away, she kind of loses a fraction of her identity. So I'm not entirely sure what to do with Ashrah as a character, as she seems to be quite a fragile one when it comes to rebooting her story. Now next, we have the dynamic duo of Kira and Kobra, and yeah, you're going in the red. Now, there's a pretty solid reason why. Since the reboot of Mortal Kombat 9, we've had a lot, and I mean a lot, of exposure to the Black Dragon clan, with even the likes of Tremor returning. And don't get me wrong, I like these guys. The Black Dragons are cool, but we've seen so much of them since Mortal Kombat 9. And with this game being set in the past, I simply think it would be a much better opportunity to utilize the likes of the Red Dragon clan. Plus, again, going back to what I said about Onaga maybe being alive, we know that the Red Dragon clan does worship Onaga, and it gives us the chance to actually explore the more occult side of what the Red Dragons are all about. And again, taking into mind how far back in time this is supposed to take place, it wouldn't make sense for Kira or Kobra to be alive here. I'm sorry, I know some people like Kobra, but I just don't think he quite fits into the mold here, especially with what is kind of being set up. We of course have the Dragon King Onaga, probably the most obvious entry to this list. During the 3D era of games, so much fundamentally revolves around this character. The legend around him alone makes him a force to be reckoned with, and being the progenitor to the great Shao Kahn sets him up to be the next big bad. And conceptually, in terms of design alone, Onaga's fantastic. He adds so much lore and so much presence to the greater overall universe. I really like what Onaga brought to the series. However, due to the limitations of its time, or maybe even Deception running out of budget, Onaga's setup and defeat in Deception felt largely underwhelming, as his betrayal of Shujinko was exceptionally fast for such a slow burn twist. Plus, winning with the power of friendship, it's just not the best way to wrap up your story. And the thing is, after his defeat, he's then sidelined during the events of Armageddon, and then is seamlessly killed off screen by Shao Kahn, which to me actually never quite sat right with me. Of course, they did try to reincorporate this character during the MKX comic book line, with him being set up as the big bad for the second season, but with it being retconned and discontinued, it does at least now mean that utilizing Onaga is possible. It's just an honest shame it has taken so long for us to once again get around to using this character. And again, Onaga hasn't even been guaranteed or confirmed for Mortal Kombat 12, but it would be really refreshing to see him. Now, going back to Order Realm characters, we now have Darrius and Dairou, characters that you probably don't remember, and there's a good reason why. These two are horribly underdeveloped in a sad and comical way. A shame as well, because Darius's design is based off Blade. I love the movie Blade. The thing is, both of these characters played an unbelievably minor role during Deception's Conquest mode, and honestly, that was the last time either of these two were actually relevant. So sidelining them wouldn't exactly be a bad thing. I mean, you could even write in that the realm of Sido is fighting off against Darrius and his rebellion, something they had been doing prior to the events of Mortal Kombat Deception. So it kind of does work, and at least the two do exist. It's just, I don't think either of them are important enough to be tied to the main narrative. Now, moving on to Armageddon, we are at our final two characters here, Taven and Daegon. A classic prophesized Child of Fate storyline, one that seeks to avert literal Armageddon. Again, this is a story that has been done for millennia. It's nothing particularly too special, but their biggest crutch, much like Blaze, is that they are both tied around this one specific prophecy. That is their fundamental importance to this universe. And even then, they still fail in completing the prophecy. Both Taven and Daegon's biggest flaw is that the main purpose for them existing no longer really exists anymore. That is, of course, if Armageddon isn't really a thing, which it probably won't be. It's kind of a repackaged situation here. And whilst I can see Daegon actually doing something here, as he's the leader of the Red Dragon clan, what of Taven? Because with no Armageddon and no new era of gods, Taven kind of gets robbed of his identity here. Maybe you could try to write him into a role where he's trying to bring his brother to justice? I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one. I just feel like there's more going for Daegon than there is actually going for Taven right now. Honestly, I'm a bit lost for words on what can be done for him. There's some ideas on the table that do kind of work, but there are way more that do actually slip through the cracks here. With all this said and done, that actually covers every 3D character ushered in from Deadly Alliance onwards. And, well, my opinion still hasn't changed too much. I think there are definitely characters better than others. This is something that also horribly plagues the NetherRealm series of games. But man, do some of these characters really deserve a facelift? Personally, I think there's a lot that can be done here, but it does kind of play around with the question of whether or not do I think some of these characters are worth revisiting, or is it maybe just better to start on a new page? All things considered, I do think I did a pretty good job here of making sense of what I feel works here and what doesn't work with the current premise. I'm just interested to see how much of this reigns true in the next installment, or if we just get the MK9 roster again with a few extra characters, which I'm really hoping isn't the case, as I think Mortal Kombat as a franchise would really benefit from moving forward, opposed to just doing MK1 to 4 again and again and again and again. It's like we're living in Groundhog Day. I'm not a fan. So, with that said, everyone, what did you think of this video? And of course, how wrong am I? Because I'm definitely gonna see that. Definitely gonna see that. What 3D character would you like to see return during Mortal Kombat 12? As well as what would you like to see be done with them if you wish to reboot or redesign them? And again, if you guys really enjoyed this one, if enough of you like this video, and this gets a good response from you all, I may actually explore the Shang Tsung ending, despite the fact that I don't think the likelihood of that ending being too real here. But for now, everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, everyone, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting as we all await NetherRealm's next big release. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.